Pete? Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Lango, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the Board of Trustees, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. I just have one announcement. Just a reminder that the annual congregational meeting will be held at the church after the service on June 11th. We encourage people to attend personally, but remote participation will be available on Zoom. Also, during first hour on June 4th and June 11th, there will be a forum on the church budget. Please try to attend. Thank you. When Pastor Tom is not in the pulpit, we invite a guest or member of the congregation to speak. Today we have our own board president, Sandi Waters. We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of the service, however, is private, and we will take a break during that time. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Now please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know that you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart, and silence your devices and take a deep breath and another, and join us in the spirit of reverence.
Dark. to be loved. We need love. We were willing. We came when you called. But man, you fooled us. Enough is enough. What about us? What about all the times you said you had the answers? What about us? What about all the broken happy ever afters? What about us? What about all the plans that ended in disaster? What about love? What about trust? What about us? Sticks and stones they may break these bones, but then I'll be ready. Are you ready? It's the start of us waking up. Come on, are you ready? I'll be ready. I don't want control. I want to let go. Ready? I'll be ready. 'Cause now it's time to let them know. What about all the times you said had the answers? What about us? What about all the broken happy ever afters? What about all the plans that ended in disaster? What about love? What about trust? What about us? What about love? What about trust? What about us? What about love? What about trust? What about us? Enough is enough.
If you would, join me in lighting the chalice. We gather this hour
As people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs, we light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. The opening words are from the author Meg Medina. To pull books from a school library because of the discomfort they create in adults is a recipe for disaster. It erodes the trust young people have in adults, in their lives, and pushes them to secrecy. It undermines the studied opinion of the professional librarians and educators. It supports a false idea that there is one version of life that is acceptable, and it denigrates the work of authors who are brave enough to name experiences that are difficult and real. Please join me in the opening hymn, number 338 in the gray hymnal, "The Spirit, I Seek the Spirit of a Child." And we'll be doing that with the help of I think we're ready. Please stand if you're willing and able.
I seek the spirit of a child who meets life naturally, the child who sings the world alive and greets the morning sun with glee. Children are real beyond all art. May I see joy's a gift to our heart. I seek the freedom of a child,
affirmation of faith. The words are printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is the time during our service when we greet our neighbors, because, hello? So please take a moment to turn around and wave to everybody, and especially our tech team, because we really needed them today. And I think we can sing the doxology without Jeremy's assistance. Anybody want to give us? Ready? From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue. Amen.
Good morning. This is the time of the service where we share our joys and sorrows. This congregation expresses our deepest sorrows and greatest joys in community. We believe that a sorrow shared is diminished and a joy shared is magnified. We pause, listening to what arises in our hearts. If anyone would like to share a joy or sorrow today, I will come to you with the microphone. Please stand and share your name and tell us your joy or sorrow.
I had a hard time choosing a book for today. As you can see from what I have here, I had a few choices. This is The Librarian of Basra, a true story from Iraq, and I thought it was very appropriate. In the Quran, the first thing God said to Muhammad was, read. Aliyah Muhammad Bakr is the librarian of Basra, a port city in the sand-swept country of Iraq. Her library is a meeting place for all who love books. They discuss matters of the world and matters of the spirit. Until now they talk only of war. Will planes with bombs fill the sky? Will bombs fall here? Will soldiers with guns fill the streets? Who among us will die? Will our families survive? What can we do? Aliyah worries that the fires of war will destroy the books, which are more precious to her than mountains of gold. The books are in every language, new books, ancient books, even a biography of Muhammad that is 700 years old. She asks the governor for permission to move them to a safe place. He refuses. So Aliyah takes matters into her own hands. Secretly, she brings books home every night, filling her car late after work. The whispers of war grow louder. Government offices are moved into the library. Soldiers with guns wait on the roof. Aliyah waits and fears the worst. Then rumors become reality. War reaches Basra. The city is lit with a firestorm of bombs and gunfire. Aliyah watches as library workers, government workers, and soldiers abandon the library. Only Aliyah is left to protect the books. She calls over the library wall to her friend, Anis Muhammad, who owns a restaurant on the other side. Can you help me save the books? I can use these curtains to wrap them, he says. Here are crates from my shop. Can you use these sacks? The books must be saved. All through the night, Aliyah, Anis, his brothers and shopkeepers and neighbors take the books from the library shelves, pass them over the 7-foot wall, and hide them in Anis's restaurant. The books stay hidden as the war rages on. Then, 9 days later, a fire burns the library to the ground. The next day, soldiers come to Anis's restaurant. Why do you have a gun, they ask. To protect my business, Anis replies. The soldiers leave without searching inside. They do not know that the whole of the library is in my restaurant, thinks Anis. At last, the beast of war moves on. Aliyah knows that if the books are to be safe, they must be moved again while the city is quiet. So she hires a truck to bring all 30,000 books to her house and to the houses of friends. In Aliyah's house, and I can identify with this, books are everywhere, filling floors and cupboards and windows, leaving barely enough room for anything else.
Now, is that a picture of your house?
Yeah, could be. Aliyah waits. She waits for war to end. She waits and dreams of peace. She waits and dreams of a new library. But until then, the books are safe, safe with the librarian of Basra. And this book was challenged and has been removed from libraries. And the reason is that it glorifies a non-Christian religion. When I originally decided to take the opportunity to fill an opening in the worship calendar to present a service, my plan was to present a sermon that reflected my deep love for children's literature and my appreciation for watching children over the years as they explored all the wonderful stories that had been and were being written. It seemed an obvious choice for a 74-year-old woman who still collects and reads children's picture books and middle grade books, what my kids and I used to call chapter books, and young adult books. 44 years ago, in my second quarter in graduate school, studying comparative literature, at the University of Chicago, I took a class titled The Fairy Tale and the Emergence of the Self. It sounded like a fun diversion from the more strenuous classes in medieval French poetry and Marxist literary theory. It was co-taught by one of my French professors and a practicing psychiatrist, and we did indeed read a great many fairy tales. Our principal critical text was Bruno Bettelheim's The Uses of Enchantment, The Meaning and Importance of Fairy Tales, published 3 years previously to critical acclaim. It was a challenging read, and despite the Freudian overtones, much of what Bettelheim said about the power of story to aid children in their development and their ability to discover meaning made a modicum of sense. Years later, however, I found the writings of Robert Coles, especially in his The Call of Stories, Teaching and the Moral Imagination, to be much more inspiring and considerably less prescriptive. And it was more than a decade later when Bruno Bettelheim died and the academic and publishing worlds learned that the book was mostly likely plagiarized and that nearly every fact about Bettelheim's credentials and life story were largely fictitious. He was essentially the George Santos of his time. Allergies. Within 3 years of that course, my immersion in 10 weeks of fairy tales and their relevance to the psychological development of children, I was embarking on another adventure. This one with a child of my own, my son Josh, and 2.5 years later, his sister Vanessa. I was reading books to them when they were infants. And when they were older, story time became the highlight of the day. They had many favorites: Dr. Seuss, William Steig, A.A. Milne, and before I knew it, they were growing up and we were reading chapter books, and Roald Dahl was among their favorites. Which brings me to why I changed course for today's service. I am very concerned about the direction that we are taking in this country. That is the reason for the display you see here in the sanctuary. Throughout history, we have had attempts to ban or challenge books. Until 1966, the Catholic Church had its Index Librorum Prohibitorum list of prohibited books. And other religious institutions also banned or challenged books that they felt threatened their authority. And of course, in the past century, we saw Nazis burning books and the Soviet Union imprisoning authors of works that were insufficiently supportive of totalitarianism. And we have done our share in this country. Our punishments for daring to write and publish works that challenge tradition or authority have not been nearly as severe, but I am very concerned that the increased attacks on books in schools and school libraries and public libraries is going to have dire consequences for our children, and by extension, our teachers and librarians. We have had book burnings. The Quran was burnt on a regular basis after 9/11. And before those burnings, there was an example in 1973 when a school board in North Dakota confiscated copies of Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, which was being used in an English class. Many of the students refused to give up their books, so the school ordered a search of their lockers and burnt all the copies of Slaughterhouse-Five they found there. Yes, burnt. On Jeremy's piano in the corner there are copies of a list of organizations that fight censorship. Please take one with you today. You can visit their websites to learn what you can do to help fight the banning and removal of books and the threats to funding for public libraries and the threats, some of them physical threats, to librarians and teachers. PEN America issues annual reports on the banning of books. And for the year June 2021 to June 2022, there were 2,532 instances of books being banned. And the banning took place in 138 school districts in 32 states. States with the most bans: Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania. That last one surprised me. Followed by Idaho, Wisconsin, Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma. 41% of the banned books addressed LGBTQ themes or have LGBTQ protagonists or secondary characters. Books like Lawn Boy, or This Day in June, or Beyond Magenta. Transgender and non-binary teens speak out, or All Are Welcome, or George, now titled Melissa. 40% of the banned books contain protagonists or secondary characters of color. Books like Henry's Freedom Box, or The Story of Ruby Bridges, or Hair Love, or The Undefeated, or New Kid, or Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. 21% directly address issues of race or racism, or, for those who seek to ban these books, CRT. Books such as The Watsons of Birmingham, or How to Be an Anti-Racist, or Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, or The Hate You Give, are among those books. 22% contain sexual content of varying kinds. Books such as Speak, or The Bluest Eye, both of which deal with rape and the consequences of rape of a young girl. Or To Kill a Mockingbird, or Their Eyes Were Watching God. There are currently more than 50 groups, more than 50 groups that have been organized around the country that are pushing to ban books, and in many cases pursue educational gag orders on teachers and librarians. 73% of these groups have formed since 2021. In addition, there is a related movement to target public libraries, intimidating and harassing and seeking the firing of librarians, and in some cases, attempting to defund and shut down our public libraries. These groups may even begin to affect the publishers. There was a recent attempt on the part of the publisher of Roald Dahl's exceptionally popular kids' books to issue new editions of Dahl's books to correct some of the language that some people found offensive. One example, to change the descriptive word fat to enormous. This announcement was met with outrage by readers and authors alike. And eventually, the publisher, the Puffin division of Penguin Random House, decided to, yes, reissue the books that the sensitivity readers had corrected, but to also continue publishing the Dahl books in an unaltered classic edition. The kerfuffle prompted my daughter to text me to see if I still had his books, because she wanted the originals when my grandson is old enough for them. I assured her that I had them in storage. They would be here if they were not in storage. As a matter of fact, all of our Roald Dahl books are not part of the display here today because they are packed away in the basement in a basement storage bin. My son's favorite Roald Dahl book was James and the Giant Peach, which has been regularly banned or challenged for mysticism, the promotion of disobedience, a consistent charge against Roald Dahl books, and for being too scary. Vanessa had many favorites, and she named the two mice she had as part of her science fair project for Bruno and Luke, two of the main characters in The Witches. Laurie Halse Anderson, an excellent award-winning author of young adult novels, has faced challenges to nearly every book she has written. Her book, Speak, tells the story of a teen who is raped at a party and for whom the trauma is so overwhelming that she nearly loses the ability to speak. It is only through her artistic expression that she gradually heals herself. Anderson, who was herself the victim of rape, has received letters from readers that have thanked her for helping them heal after having experienced a similar assault. Anderson says that, quote, censorship is the child of fear and the father of ignorance. And in her introduction to the graphic novel version of Speak, she writes, quote, the school board banned one of Maya Angelou's books, so the librarian had to take down her poster. I fished it out of the trash. She must be a great writer if the school board is scared of her. That is a sentiment I share. Much of the banning and challenging of books that I have read about seems to be motivated by fear, a feeling that you are not in control of things you feel you should control. Is it fear of the other? Fear of having your authority challenged by your child? Fear of making us see or hear or read something that we would rather not face or admit? Or as Ursula Le Guin writes, a dangerous book will always be in danger from those it threatens, with the demand that they question their assumptions. They'd rather hang on to the assumptions and ban the book. And Pete Houtman, known for his excellent young adult novels, tells us that, yes, books are dangerous. They should be dangerous. They contain ideas. His thoughts are echoed in the wonderful book on children's lit by Allison Lurie, Don't Tell the Grown-Ups Why Kids Love the Books They Do. In her foreword to the book, she explains that the sacred texts of childhood are not always the ones adults recommend. She realized that for children, there were two sorts of books on the shelves of libraries when she was growing up. The majority were those that told her what grown-ups had decided she ought to know or believe about the world. And then there were those that hoped to teach her manners or morals or both. The protagonists of these books, she said, learned to depend on authority for help and advice. They also learned to be hardworking, responsible, and practical, to stay on the track and be content with their lot in life. They learned, in other words, to be more like respectable grown-ups. But the young Allison Lurie soon discovered another sort of literature written for children, the sacred texts of childhood, whose authors had not forgotten what it was like to be a child. For Lurie, to read these books was to feel a shock of recognition, a rush of liberating energy. She saw herself, or some version of herself, in the stories she was reading. These books told their young readers that it was perfectly okay to daydream, to disobey, to run away from home, and not to share your innermost thoughts, your private self, with unsympathetic grown-ups. They made fun of adult institutions and authority figures. I was an early reader as a child, and my parents, grandmother, and godmother did everything they could to encourage me. My father, who had a pretty extensive library, joined a kids' book club for me. Can't remember the name of the club, but the books arrived every month, 2 of them at a time, I think. They were what the kids and I called chapter books. Probably a bit beyond my 4-year-old self, but I tried reading them nonetheless. They were profoundly boring. The 5 Little Peppers and How They Grew, and Little Lord Fauntleroy, and most others I don't even remember. My aunt, who was my godmother and took pity on me, went to the library one day and brought back 3 books that I loved and still love to this day. 5 Children and It, The Railway Children, and The Treasure Seekers, all by E. Nesbit, and all published at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th centuries. I was entranced. The children in all the books were adventurous and sometimes in serious peril. I was never in the least bit bored, and it wasn't long before I was reading Mark Twain and Alice in Wonderland and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and searching through my father's books for something challenging or interesting. I was very lucky in that my parents never forbade me from reading anything I thought I could read. They knew I would concede defeat if it was something beyond my ken, as I did the first time I picked up Moby Dick. which much later became one of my favorite books. But young people growing up in the 50s and even into the 60s were never exposed to the wonderful and influential and healing writing of authors like Judy Blume, whose Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret was first published in 1970. And I just bought a copy of it for my granddaughter 2 weeks ago. Finally, there were books being written and published that dealt with real-life issues for young people, that gave them a sense of connection by telling stories about protagonists who were experiencing the same things they were experiencing and would be experiencing. And of course, these books were challenged and banned. And of course, as we are seeing now, not only in Texas and Florida, but throughout the country, books that give voice to those who are different and those who struggle and those who are oppressed and those who are victims of rape or other forms of violence will continue to be challenged and banned and threatened, as will the people, teachers, librarians, and authors who tell their stories and honor and protect them. Deborah Caldwell Stone, the director of the American Library Association's Office of Intellectual Freedom, tells us, to be told that your books can't be on display or that your books are inappropriate because they simply reflect your life and experiences, it's not only an act of censorship, but an act of violence to the community. We live in times that are awash in fear, as the philosopher Martha Nussbaum deals in her book, The Monarchy of Fear. A philosopher looks at our political crisis. There is no doubt that, as Judy Blume tells us, censorship grows out of fear, and that this fear is often disguised as moral outrage. I'm not sure what we can do to help people become less fearful. But I am absolutely certain that unless and until we do something to stem this tide, that our grandchildren and children will suffer great harm. Because as Ray Bradbury writes, there is more than one way to burn a book, and the world is full of people running around with lit matches. Thank you. She has it. Yeah, she has it. Rachel has it. Thanks, Jim.
I really want to. Thanks. Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship, and we give with the faith that together we have enough. The money in our baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. The money in our cups goes to the Faith in Action Ministry, and a different charity is chosen by the ministry every month. This month, the money in the cups goes to the Hobart Humane Society, which is an Oak Hill shelter. For those not here with us today, there's an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. Would 4 volunteers please come up and...
Just a reminder, this is the last Sunday for
Hobart.
the Hobart Humane Society.
For your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts, we are truly grateful. It's okay. Let's go. And now please rise as you're willing and able to sing our closing hymn, number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky, in the gray hymnal.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faithful quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why. In our lives the answer show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between, to follow a star, to build a dream.
Thank you. May you please be seated. Closing words are by the historian Henry Steele Commager. The fact is that censorship always defeats its own purpose, for it creates in the end the kind of society that is incapable of exercising real discretion. In the long run, it will create a generation incapable of appreciating the difference between independence of thought and subservience.
Now, if you would.
Who are on the road must have a code that you can live by, and so become yourself, because the past is just a goodbye. Teach your children well, their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams, the one they picked, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why, if they told you you would cry, so just look at them and sigh. Of tender years, can't know the fears that your elders grew by, and so please help them with your youth. They see the truth before they can die. Teach your parents as well. Their children's hell will slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams. The one they picked, the one you know by. Don't you ever ask them why. If they told you, you would cry. So just look at them and sigh, and know they love
If you would, help me extinguish the flame. Okay. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community,
or the
fire of commitment.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you.
Nice job, Sandi.
Thank you. If you're curious about why any